Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's great to see AIBC come to Asia and hold their first event in the Philippines. So it's a testament to how far the Philippines ecosystem has come since I first started getting involved with it, or I started, witnessing it in the last 7, 8 years. And it's my pleasure to host two panels today. The first one with most of the stellar lights of this industry, whom I'm sure most of you know, and who have been fellow leaders, fellow enthusiasts, and those who believed and walked the talk in this space well before it became so popular and mainstream and something that all of us got interested in. So without further ado, let me call upon stage our three panelists. Commissioner Kelvin, again. Please give a big round of applause to him. Next, I would like to invite my good friend Lito, who wears many hats, but he is the chairman of the FinTech Alliance, so, all things FinTech in the Philippines. And last but not the least, Stephanie. So, time is limited, and I thought we'll start with a brief round of introductions by the speakers. But I'll skip that, and if everybody's okay, I'll jump straight to the topics on hand. And we're going to be looking at blockchain 4.0. I mean, good, right? Nice jargons on stage. Blockchain 4.0, crypto winter 2.0. A lot of the stuff that you hear at such events, and for someone like me who's spoken at these kinds of events all over the world for the last 8, 9 years, I can assure you I have seen this space come a very long way. And my endeavor on panels like these, with well-rounded panels like these, with a panel of genuine experts, is to simplify the complex and to demystify and to separate the noise and the hype from the signals and facts. And I think who better than these two gentlemen and the lady to talk about it. So while we'll talk in the context of the Philippines, we will try and take maybe regional views or global views as well. And therefore, let me start with Lito, because I'm going to start with what is one of my favorite topics, and I also wear the hat of a professor. So I teach MBA and executive MBA students as well as senior corporate leaders about all things fintech, blockchain, crypto, and a fair amount of, that comes with how far have we come or not come when it comes to blockchain adoption at the industry level. So some of you who've been in this space for long like us would remember that a few years back, WEF came up with a very well publicized and hyped up report at the peak of the first blockchain hype cycle, which said that by 2023 or 2024, I think 2023, 10% of the global GDP will be on blockchain. Well, here we are in 2023, and I don't think anybody can claim that. And then over the years, there were some follow-up reports by other leading global entities which said 2025, 2027, some said 10%, some said 5%. But the fact is, realistically, honestly, as an industry, we are nowhere close to that. So I'm going to start with the gentleman who wears multiple hats and who can give us both perspectives, right? That of a traditional bank organization, which is quite progressive. Lito heads innovation at RCBC Bank, but also someone who's at the forefront of the fintech and blockchain ecosystem in this part of the world. So Lito, tell us, honestly, realistically, hand on your heart, and perhaps even critically if needed, how far have we come? How far do we have to go? What are the opportunities, and more importantly, what have been the impediments so far in this quote-unquote 10% GDP adoption or 10% GDP being on the blockchain when I'm sure not even 1% is on blockchain. So if your organization had to migrate from legacy systems to blockchain or even consider it, what would be the top three considerations and maybe top three challenges that you and your board and senior management team would consider?
Thank you, Malik. I think just to put some context, I'm wearing multiple hats now. I'm with RCBC as the Chief Innovation Inclusion Officer, and at the same time, the Chairman of the FinTech Alliance. That is the largest digital organization in the country, where the membership would collectively generate over 95% of retail financial transactions in digital format across the country. And also, I'm a trustee of the Philippine Blockchain Council. So into that, to your statement, Malik, I mean, definitely we're not near that projection, even in 2025, in terms of even 1%, as you said. Because I think what is really critical is really education, right? And having to also involve other stakeholders, especially, for example, regulators or the government per se. But of course, I think this is something that the industry, in terms of the practitioners, the players, and advocates of blockchain would have to be united in terms of having to push and further promote education and awareness amongst consumers. And I think at the end of the day, it's really more on how to gain the trust of the public, because we have seen quite a number of articles pertaining to the negative side or the negative perception about blockchain. And of course that because I think that the crypto winter that we've been talking about for since last year has been also has also dragged that issue on adoption. And I think for us, especially, we are working with regulators. Of course, we have here our friend Commissioner Kelvin, who has been very progressive in terms of having to promote further innovation in scaling inclusive digital finance. And of course, he made mention of that. I mean, he emphasized that in his earlier presentation. Innovation is something that they have been supporting for the longest time, and for as long as it covers or it promotes and assures consumer protection and assures market stability or financial stability. So I think this is something that we are really promoting and collectively working well with regulators and other players in the industry, because this is, again, at the end of the day, is all about trust.
I'd like to add on that. But before I do, I would like to just correct. I am from nChain, not from Access Blockchain of Malaysia. So I actually lead the business development here in the Philippines, and we work closely with the government. And one of the things Mr. Lito here mentioned is that it is important to educate not just the public, but at the same time the government agencies. And I'm very glad that our Philippine president right now has mandated to digitalize the country, supported by the E-Governance Act. And that is very important. And this is where we start as a nation to really and truly understand the power of the technologies that we have today. So it's very important, like what he said, to cultivate that education and to foster that, not only among individuals like us, but the very units of the government, which will drive policies, because enterprises like RCBC can only do so much, right? The government should drive all these policies and regulatory frameworks that will strengthen the industry and the use cases and applications that can be applied using these technologies.
Thank you, Lito and Stephanie. And before I continue, just a side note, it's something which just struck me when I was looking at them. I've moderated many panels on blockchain and crypto all over the world. This must be the first one where all four of us on stage are wearing jackets. So either you can assume that this is a really serious, robust panel of experts, or we are completely clueless and we are completely cut off with what's happening, because there's no one here wearing hoodies or t-shirts or shorts or hats. So
Prof, for the record, after this, I have to go back to my Commission and Bank meeting. I'm actually skipping the first portion of it to be here, so I can't go around in shorts. No, if I go to the Commission and Bank meeting in shorts.
Well, I think
and
you were
t-shirt.
expected, but it just struck me suddenly, seeing, oh wow, this is one of those really rare sights at a blockchain conference. But coming to that, we heard both our other panelists talk about educating the government, working with the government, a collaborative approach, an ecosystem approach. And Commissioner, before this, in your keynote, you articulated quite well about how the SEC as one of the two key nodal agencies in the finance space in this country is doing some pretty progressive work under your leadership on AI. But let's now see the SEC's perspective and your perspective on blockchain and crypto. I know time is very limited, so maybe in a very concise manner, can you articulate or share with our audience what are the top 3 things that the SEC is maybe tracking, looking at, considering, thinking about, or 1 or 2 things which make you sleepless at night?
Sleepless at night. Well, at the end of the day, the number one, I'd like to think the number one priority for the SEC would be investor protection, consumer protection, customer protection, whatever you may wish to call it. But at the end of the day, it's making sure our constituents, the Filipino people, are safe, no, when it comes to investments or investment scams, and for that matter. So that's perhaps number one. We need to make sure we keep our constituents safe. Secondly, would be financial stability. Making sure that whatever comes in, whatever innovation, blockchain related or not, will not cause any instability to the market. No, if possible, it helps the market move forward. In fact, it would be the major consideration. And third, what's keeping me up at night, whether or not to regulate these innovations, perhaps. Because there's always the question, do we leave it alone? Do we just let it run its natural course, and then we'll see whether or not there's a need to regulate it or not? Of course, whether or not to regulate it is based on the first 2 points I made: consumer protection, investor protection, and financial stability. So those are the 3 things that are always top of mind, and as a result of which we don't, we can't really sleep because we keep thinking about it, I guess, to use your terminology. I hope that kind of gives you an idea how we think.
Thank you. And I think this is a topic on which we can go on for another 30 to 45 minutes just on this. The perpetual dilemma of policymakers, and because I interact with a lot of them, this is not unique to what you said in the context of the Philippines. Should you lead with regulations? Should regulations follow? And at what point, does it become a risk to systemic stability and consumer protection? And both of these are very, very important points you touched upon, something that most regulators obviously have it in their radar and even their KPI. So I'm going to go back to Lito and Stephanie. We talk about the crypto winter, and at least some of us here who've been in this space for long have seen the first boom-bust cycle of 2016-17, and then the crypto winter and the crash of 2018, and then this 2.0 winter starting with the market correction in 2022. My question to both of you is, on the basis of these 2-3 key things which seem to be consistent themes, investor protection, consumer protection, systemic stability, transparency, compliance, fair play, fair competition, how far have we come along in this industry? Because there have been many statistics which have floated around, and during the, there's this saying of Warren Buffett, right? Or I think it was Warren Buffett. He said it in the context of the broader markets, but it's probably more relevant to crypto, that it's only when the wave subsides that you see, who's without clothes. So that's probably the reality of what we saw in the last 1.5 years. Before that, we've heard statistics like there are 5 million crypto wallets in the Philippines, and then we saw the boom and I shouldn't say bust, but a significant challenge for one of the popular games in the gaming industry, and whether it is classified as a work activity, payment activity, etc. So tell us very briefly, maybe 2 or 3 key things that you see which have changed in this industry in the 2.0 winter versus the 1.0 winter, and where do you see the industry emerging out of these? Stephanie, we'll start with you.
Well, the good thing that happened during the crypto winters was that there was already an explosion of use cases and applications that were built that is beyond tokens, that is beyond FinTech. in fact, Philippines is actually very good with the leadership of Mr. Lito, yung pushing forward the fintech side. But what we're looking into and what we have learned from the government agencies that we have been working with, is that they're looking for actual use cases and applications beyond fintech. And I think that is important in terms of like a mainstream adoption, because as you know, as we all know, like Philippines is like the fifth cryptocurrency highest cryptocurrency adoption in the world, but it's very specific to gamings and entertainment and tokens. But if we shift that into actual use cases, like applications that would really benefit us as a nation, from agriculture, from IoT devices powered by blockchain technologies, to disaster management systems, those things, and incentivizing people through these applications, I think that's where we are heading, because the government is already looking into those type of use cases that industry has not really tapped into for the past couple of years. And I think the Philippines specifically is very committed to making sure that it's going to happen. And and I really believe that it's important that there is a push from the highest office in the country to make this happen. And I think that's the very result of the crypto winter, because people decided to focus on what matters beyond the tokens.
Thanks, Stephanie, and that was very passionately articulated. So, Lito, I'm going to wear a slightly different hat, that of my professor's hat, but also I'm going to play devil's advocate. For folks like us who've seen both these cycles and who've been in this industry for long, this all almost gives a sense of deja vu, right? Even after the 2018 crash, we heard the same things: focus on use cases, focus on value addition, focus on robustness, business models, so on and so forth. And it's not that any of these use cases are particularly new. We heard the same things in 2018-19 as well, right? Agriculture, agri-tokens, security tokens, art, real estate. These were great things which were trying to marry or bridge the gap between the real world and the world of tokens, and make things more inclusive and affordable. But where has been the gap, Lito? Let's be honest about it. If in 4 or 5 years we have, and one of my friends is fond of saying that in this space, you can't even say 4 or 5 years, because each year is equivalent to a dog year or a cat year, right? That's how fast it works, 6 to 7 years. So if you say 4 years, it's almost, or 5 years, it's like 30 years in the normal industry. So that's enough time for any technology. Like we saw Facebook launching its Twitter rival, right? And in a matter of weeks, it got 100 million signups. So, and we've seen this with other games, etc. So we've never seen anything like this in the world of blockchain for the last 15 odd years that it's been around. We never saw anything, grow to 100 million users. What is missing? Is it simplicity? Is it customer experience? Is it safety? Is it that the right people are not leading this industry? What's your view?
Well, I think blockchain has so much promise, right? And I think this is something that we all know. I mean, those people who are here, we all know that. But the thing is, in terms of the acceptance or in terms of appreciation of those values, would be different on a per sector, on a per individual basis. But I think for the Philippines, you're talking about use cases, and of course, Stephanie also made mention of use cases. I think for the Philippines, in terms of having to really highlight, one of the best use cases here would be the cross-border transfers, because that Philippines would, we have one of the biggest diasporas in the world. We have over 10 million Filipinos overseas, working in over 100 countries. And having to, send money back home is, again, another pain for them, because it's really kind of costly in terms of speed, in terms of efficiency, transparency, etc. Would be something that could also be resolved or could be addressed by these technologies, right? But, there was even an article, that was published where they're now saying that about 7 to 10% of the inward remittance volume into the Philippines would now be via this technology, right? So no longer just maybe about 90% would be the traditional way of sending money back to Philippines. But I think for the Philippines, in terms of context, we have more than 20 VASP licensees, right? So virtual asset service providers issued by the BSP, but only a handful of these 20 or more than 20 would be very active in, in the market. But again, that's something that, of course, we know for a fact that a lot of us or a lot of our friends whom we know and practically our office mates would be doing all these transactions or doing all these activities. But again, it should be at the end of the day having to have that dialogue or collaboration among stakeholders in the industry and being able to really, come up with the roadmap moving forward. Because I think for the Philippines, there's still no specific roadmap to talk about or to be presented, in terms of what will now be the Philippine blockchain roadmap moving forward.
Thank you. I'm going to again press a little more on this topic because it's seldom that folks like me or us get these kinds of chances during the hype cycle. When you ask tough questions, you're absolutely unpopular on stage. It's only now that you can really talk about real fundamental aspects. So same thing, different perspective to you, Commissioner, from a policymaker, regulators, government's perspective. And I'll put some context to it. Back in 2015, when I was at a conference in Singapore, and that was the time when blockchain had first just exploded into, I won't say mass consciousness, but at least within the industry, it became more than a buzzword or more than a playground of just techies. And Singapore being one of the leaders in this space, one of the keynote speakers was a minister. I won't name him. He was a minister in the Singapore government, but of course he was very, very clued into what was happening. So he coined an interesting phrase which has stuck with me and many of us, I'm sure. He said back in 2015, people ask us what is Singapore's approach to blockchain, etc. It's a great technology, it's a foundational technology. But he didn't say that, he kind of put it back to the industry saying, is it an elegant solution in search of a problem? Circa 2023, 8 years later, and if you apply the dog years formula, almost half a century has passed in the life of this industry. Are we still, from a regulator's perspective, grappling with the same set of questions, especially since you said earlier that, what keeps you up at night is this fact on whether you should lead with regulation, you should follow with regulation. So is it great and all your concerns about investor protection and systemic stability are fair and in their own place, but is it still fundamentally, from your perspective, an elegant solution, still trying to find use cases and solutions, or you think we've come far ahead of that, and what next, or what's next for this industry when we say 4.0?
Well, actually, there are already, there's an unofficial race. Let me just say it this way. There's an unofficial race actually among government agencies. I know for a fact, because I've been talking to some of them, of who will deploy the blockchain within their systems. None of us will tell each other what we're doing, at least not officially, if you know what I mean, no? Because we don't want to preempt each other. But certainly, I don't think it's an elegant solution looking for a problem. I think it's a given that there are problems, and one possible solution would be using the blockchain. At least that's how I look at it. That's how I'm dealing, for instance, with a certain. I just can't talk about it too much because it's still fairly raw. We're still sorting out the technical details. But there are solutions that we're working together with private sector already that will largely use that blockchain, the blockchain. No? I think that would be a more accurate way of saying it, that it is a solution. It is a elegant solution that's already sorting out certain problems. At least that's how I would see it.
Thank you. And perhaps some of your perspectives come because you're already so clued into this industry. You go and speak at events, you interact with all of us. So you have that progressive mindset. But let me just throw it back to you, and this is no suggestion on, I'm sure the Philippines government is far, far wiser than me or any of us on stage. But since you say that it's not searching for problems anymore, but it's already solving problems, what about something like land registry, right? The LRA. probably one of the most uh, obvious use case where the pain is so real, and I'm sure any of us who bought or sold property here would know just how many stages are involved in that process, how much paper, and how much inefficiency, how much delay, how much cost. So why would, or we know that in perhaps this is not so relevant for maybe emerging markets just yet, but a few years back, Zug Valley, which is supposed to be the crypto valley in Switzerland, did a pilot of voting on blockchain. So there are already use cases, and I can already share, because I was involved as one of the advisors about, and this was just before the pandemic, one of the state governments in India created their own statewide blockchain network for delivery of government services, everything from educational to medical certificates to, aid through cash to their mobile phone wallets, etc. And that took time, that was thought out. Governments are not as fast as the private sector, but look at the scale. When it finally launched, it is now able to touch 80 million lives. So that's the scale we are looking at, and that's the power of government. That's why we and I love to have someone like you on the panel, because government is slow, and many of the maximalists would criticize that why do we need regulations in this. But I think when government thinks through and looks at it from all perspectives and then finally decides to bite the bullet, the scale is really, really impactful. So I think just a couple of
Sorry, Malik, just to comment on that. I think what you're referring to is the Personal Property Security Act, right? So that wherein the implementing agency is the Land Registration Authority, right? And that law has been, 3-year-old or 4-year-old law. And to your point, yes, the best use case would be on how to use blockchain would be on that particular segment wherein registration would not be via blockchain of all your hard and soft collaterals, right? So including, invoices, etc., right? So, but unfortunately, I mean, it seems that there's so much, the slowness of the implementation could also be seen there. But I think that's why that public-private partnership or the private sector participation in terms of having to have that that discussion or that collaboration with government is really something of value. But also just to add to that, because for example, again, as I've said, we have foreign guests here. Philippines is very, the practitioners in the Philippines, FinTech digital space, would be very lucky to have very progressive and dynamic regulators. SEC for one, the BSP, Insurance Commission, etc. They've been so progressive because, for example, even the BSP is now pushing for a regulator-led CBDC. And we're actually now, practically we're part of the 12 pilot participants, and that's something that we are actually looking forward to in terms of having to eventually fully implement by next year in terms of pilot. So, but though that CBDC PH would be on a wholesale, thing, but I think these are some of the baby steps wherein it actually shows how progressive our regulators are in terms of having them experience the actual technology that they're trying to regulate.
I would also like to add on that. We also have to understand the very context and landscape of the Philippine digital data infrastructure. And I think that's the very foundation of how we can fully adopt these technologies like blockchain technology. And right now, the Philippines, maybe a lot of people think that we're very much far behind in terms of that, but it is actually an opportunity because we can leapfrog and create all of this foundational infrastructure that is already governed and powered by blockchain technology. So right now we're working with not only with regulators but also local government units, and from there you create different use cases from digital identity where you connect other use cases like land registration. And that is the important thing. It has to be established first. We have to start from the very foundation of it before we create other applications that would benefit and would scale up and benefit 114 million Filipinos.
So very quickly to that point, I guess if private sector statements is anything to that indication, it's not that public sector is, or at least some of the agencies I know, and my agency as well, it's not that we don't want to embrace the technology. I think some of it Some of us are just taking it a little slowly, just to make sure, remember, don't forget, at the end of the day, there's that whole financial stability thing we have to keep track of. I cannot speak as to LRA, or the other agencies, but certainly that's how we're looking at it. We want to implement the technology, we want to use it, but we have to take in mind all the other considerations, stability, the wider economy as a whole, for instance.
Thank you. Some great points from our panelists. We have a couple of minutes, so before I go to the closing question, I just wanted to give a chance to the audience if there's any question that anyone wants to ask the panel. No?
I think they're scared of me.
Yeah, actually, I have a question. So we actually spoke about that this morning in the regulation panel that opened the day. So what's your take on CBDCs? So is it going to, I know that Lito just mentioned that, and there are use cases. There are so many developments in so many countries. There's like Hong Kong, UAE, there's China, right, working on that. Does it have any prospect at all where we're going to see it, and in which capacity for both users and banks?
Well, right now, I think there are only about 9 countries in the world doing CBDC, and hopefully Philippines would be the 10th or 11th. And that's why we kicked off this discussion on CBDC with the BSP about a year ago, and we're done with the phase 1 in terms of pilot in terms of what would be the use cases that we will be adopting. But I think the good thing is that of all the BSP supervised financial institutions, around 12 of us raised their hands to say we want to be part of the pilot. So I think that also gives you some semblance of interest amongst participants, may it be banks or even FinTech players, but practically majority would be banks. So which is a good thing. So, and it being regulator-led makes it more, secured and and safe.
So one last question to you on this, Commissioner, since Olga actually started a very important chain right at the end of this panel, which is CBDCs, that we could have gone on for another 45 minutes just on that, but very quickly, I know Lito said it is wholesale, and even I'm aware of it. Looking at some other countries like Hong Kong or Thailand or Singapore or Canada who've implemented wholesale solutions in phases, Commissioner, is the SEC involved or going to get involved, especially from a capital markets streamlining, automation, whatever you want to call it, perspective, or there is no plan as yet?
I actually had a meeting this morning. That's one of the reasons why I was running so late, because it was not on the agenda, and that was not on my schedule, and I had to take a meeting. Essentially, one thing we're looking at now, based on that meeting this morning, is digitalizing some of our submissions. For instance, currently, submissions for the e-Spark for our company registration is online. It's digital. No? We are not yet doing that for our IPO capital markets side of things. We're looking at rolling out that as well now. I have yet to meet my team about it because the discussion at the senior level, the chair and the commissions was just this morning. I was actually speaking with someone from the office of the president this morning on that. So that's one thing we're looking at. That moving forward, IPO submissions, at least the simple ones, not just to start out with, will be done digitally. On what platform, I'm still gonna study what platform that's easy to do. But certainly that's something we want to move forward in. No? So in terms of making it a little easier on the capital market side, that's one. And that's very fresh. Literally, just this morning, that discussion. I just had that discussion.
Thank you. I had another follow-up question, but I'll give the last chance to Olga if you have any follow-up questions on this. Oh, there is.
Thank you. I have questions with SEC is, if companies from other industry are interested in cryptocurrency, maybe they want to buying, selling, exchanging, and investing, are they have any requirements or restriction, or you have any recommend?
Well, right now, I met this gentleman last night at the dinner, no? It was Mr. Lake High. I was actually suggesting that you engage a lawyer for that. But in any case, to give you an idea of the landscape here, I prefer the term digital assets, and banks prefer the term virtual assets. Essentially, the current landscape is we don't directly regulate them yet because our digital asset rules will just come out this year. What you need to start off with would be to talk to the central bank to work towards getting a virtual asset service provider license. I understand there's still a de facto moratorium, however, meaning the 3 years. So I think there's a de facto moratorium currently at the BSP. But certainly you can start the preparation so that once the moratorium ends, you can look to register. And anyway, this year we're looking out to roll out our rules on digital asset exchanges and digital asset offerings. So you should be able to register with us, if not this year, Q1 next year. So yes, you have to go through regulations. You have to go through a lot of work actually, to get registered. I strongly recommend engaging a lawyer because this is not, or an investment banker, because this is not something you can just do on your own at this stage. This is a very regulated, protected space because of all the possible issues on financial stability that I mentioned earlier. So I hope that helps you. I think there was one more question earlier there, sir.
This question is for Mr. Lee. What do you think about BlackRock's application about Bitcoin spot ETF? Is it something that could affect Philippine markets and blockchain adoption?
Sorry. Was that for me or for you?
Mr. Lee, the SEC Commission. Commissioner. Yeah.
Right there. It's right there. So this one's from the SEC. I know I look young. It's baby face, I know. But I'm older than I look. So, sorry, say again.
What do you think about BlackRock's application about Bitcoin spot ETF? Is it something that could affect Philippine markets and blockchain adoption?
Sorry, lab rats?
BlackRock. BlackRock.
BlackRock, the investment fund, Larry Fink. What about him?
What do you think about their application about Bitcoin spot ETF?
Bitcoin says, you know what? That's a whole other thing because we've had submissions from some people, for instance, coming in wanting to set up a mutual fund which largely relies on Bitcoin and other digital assets. Our policy in relation to that has not yet been done precisely because we're working on the digital asset offerings. That might be the next thing that we'll look at now, dealing with mutual funds, ETFs that use digital assets. I will use my term, digital assets. So that will come a little later. That's probably the next step after we get the initial digital asset offering rules out later this year. If your question is, do I think it's okay or not? I actually don't see that much of an issue. I'm actually, to be very blunt about it, I'm actually more comfortable with people investing in a managed fund or a managed entity rather than directly investing in cryptocurrencies or digital assets. Why? Because there's someone looking over it. There's usually a professional that's dealing with it. So personally, as a regulator, I prefer if people invest there. But of course, we don't want to limit options. Precisely why we're going to allow, moving forward, direct access to these things. Anyway, that's how I see it. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Thank you.